Approximately 97,000 years ago, the Didact had the halos distributed across the galaxy after a long protracted battle against the Flood, and activated the rings, killing all sentient life of sufficient biomass in the Milky Way, including any surviving Forerunners within the range of the halo's effect. Hey my freaky darlings, welcome back to Installation 00. Sorry I've been absent for a short while, I've had some personal stuff to sort out, but enough about that. This is Lore and Theory, and today we're going to take a look at the very few Forerunners who are known to have survived after the activation of the Halo array. While it is possible there are many more, this is the shortlist of those who we actually know about. So let's do this. The first and currently only living Forerunner we've seen in person is of course the Didact, also known as SHADOW-OF-SUNDERED-STAR. He returned to the galaxy during the events of Halo 4 when Master Chief unknowingly woke him from his ancient slumber within his cryptum. The cryptum itself was located within the first shield world ever constructed called Requiem, which was designed to be a safe haven from the effects of the firing of the Halo array. There were numerous shield worlds constructed, and it is unclear as to whether or not they were utilised to any extent by surviving Forerunner populations, calling into question whether they may yet be more Forerunners who survive, but are still contained within their respective shield worlds. Didact, having spent 97,000 years in silence without connection to the domain, had been driven to the point of insanity, and thus immediately began a genocidal campaign against humanity. Thanks to the intervening actions of Master Chief and Cortana, Didact was prevented from further composing the human population of Earth, and was sent to Installation 03 via a slipspace portal generated beneath the composer within the Didact ship. Here he met with the resident monitor and plotted to integrate a new composer into the Halo to use against humanity. This plan was ultimately foiled by Master Chief and Blue Team, who managed to eject the control room from the Halo and impact it into the composer's forge, exposing the Didact to the combined effects of all remaining composers, digitizing his physical form and resulting in the Didact being contained for the time being. A number of Forerunners survived the firing of the Halo array. Some managed to take refuge on Installation 00, safely out of the array's range, while the Halo effect swept over the galaxy. Most notably, this included the life workers assigned to the installation and the Didact. Based on limited information prior to the firing of the Halos, most of the other rates were believed to have perished on the Greater Ark, though a number of warrior servants, builders and engineers were shown to be present later on, indicating that more Forerunners survived to take shelter on the Lesser Ark than previously predicted. These included the Didact, also known as Born Stellar Makes Eternal Lasting, Chance to Green, Glory of a Far Dawn, Keeper of Stone Songs, Splendid Dust of Ancient Suns, and Growth Through Trial of Change. Over a century after the firing of the array, these few surviving Forerunners on the Ark travelled to the Forerunner capital Maithrillian, as per the order of the Didact, to pursue information gleaned from a final message from the librarian who had willingly marooned herself on Earth. The message was a request to repair the domain as the effects of the Halo array destroyed it, due to its neurophysical nature. The following is the ultimate fates of those individuals. As former First Counselor, Splendid Dust possessed knowledge of a precursor relic housed deep within Maithrillian's Mysterium, one that was believed to control the domain itself. Furthermore, his Counselor Regalia included a device known as a Deadbolt Key, which could supposedly interact with the precursor artifact. Upon arrival at the capital, Splendid Dust and the other Forerunners were confronted by Abaddon, a powerful precursor construct that desired to bring the Forerunners to trial for their crimes. Awestruck by the majesty of the being and overwhelmed with guilt, Splendid Dust broke down before Abaddon's enormous holographic projection and waited for his sentence. Glory of a Far Dawn and Keeper of Stone Songs remained with him, even as the other Forerunners forced their way into the Mysterium. Both Glory and Keeper were killed by Abaddon, but before the Precursor Intelligence could render judgment on Splendid Dust, Growth Through Trial of Change successfully used the deadbolt key to restore the domain, causing Abaddon to vanish and saving Splendid Dust. Splendid Dust subsequently returned to the Lesser Ark with the other survivors of the expedition. Wishing to atone for the Forerunners' many crimes, he chose to be composed, becoming the monitor of Installation 00 and intending to serve as a guide for the Reclaimers once they arrived. He was given the name 000 Tragic Solitude by Born Stellar, who was greatly saddened by Dust's fate. In time, Tragic Solitude would forget his former identity and even the circumstances of his creation. Following the Battle of Installation 00 in 2552, Solitude sought revenge against humanity for the damage done to the installation and launched an invasion of Earth. During Operation Farstorm, Solitude and all that remained of Splendid Dust were destroyed by Bobby Kodiak. After the encounter with the precursor intelligence known as Abaddon in the council chamber where Splendid Dust, Glory and Keeper remained behind awaiting judgment from the precursor intelligence, Trial, Born Stellar and Chant pushed deeper into the capital in order to locate Abaddon's physical housing, where they believed the domain could be reactivated by using a deadbolt key. With Abaddon intent on stopping the Forerunners from interacting with its core, vaporizing several of them in the process, Chant Green rushed forward with the deadbolt. While none of the Forerunners knew for certain what would happen to the individual inserting the key into Abaddon's matrix, Trial and Chant believed a lifeworker mind or genetic pattern would be necessary as a template to revive the domain, along with the suspicion that this process may be fatal. Unwilling to let Chant sacrifice herself, Trial incapacitated the other lifeworker and seized the key from her, then inserted it into Abaddon's core. She was momentarily caught in an intense glow and then vanished entirely, apparently having successfully initiated the domain's slow process of regeneration. In the last days of the Forerunner Flood War, she and her key ship were hidden somewhere on the far side of the flood-infested region of the galaxy. After the destruction of the Greater Ark and the Didact's composition of Omega Halo's human population, the Librarian ordered her to go to Earth and gather and preserve as many humans as possible and send them to the Lesser Ark. She was only able to gather a few hundred, as most of Earth's human population had already been indexed earlier. After Chant had finished her work, the Librarian travelled to Earth with the intent to draw the flood there to give the Didact enough time to fire the Halo array. Soon after the Librarian's arrival, flood forces including precursor star roads were detected in the system. The Librarian then sent Chant away and gave over the title of Life Shaper to her. Having reached Installation 00 in time, Chant survived the activation of the Halo array. She was present in the trial of Mendicant Bias for its betrayal of the Ecumene. At Rise's suggestion, Chant Green and several other Forerunners joined a human celebration for the transition the galaxy now faced. She and the Didact observed the festivities from some distance away, both acknowledging the significance of Born Stellar's human friends. She accompanied the Didact on Earth during the reintroduction and shared a few last words with Riser. In the early days of the reintroduction, Chant Green engaged in a brief sexual relationship with Born Stellar, partly to soothe their shared grief over the loss of the Librarian, though this liaison did not last long. The two would remain on good terms, however. Over a century later, Chant accompanied the Didact and a number of other Forerunners on their successful mission to restore the domain at Maithrillion. After the expedition, Chant and Born Stellar reconciled their relationship and were married. With their work finished, the remaining Forerunners embarked on a great journey, exiling themselves outside of the Milky Way galaxy. Chant Green and Born Stellar settled on a distant world without the comforts of advanced technology, with Chant eventually giving birth to a son. There is a theory that the passing of the title of Life Shaper from the Librarian to Chant Green may have included a similar process to the brevet mutation that the Didact performed with Born Stellar, thereby making him a duplicate of the Didact to be known as the Didact. If this is the case, Chant Green may have experienced an expression of a Gesh of the Librarian, making her somewhat a duplicate and thus a reincarnation of the Librarian. but this is, at this stage, purely speculative. Having been on the Ark and thus out of the Halo's range, the Didact was amongst the few Forerunners who survived the galactic extinction. After Mendicant Bias's defeat at the hands of Offensive Bias, the Didact presided over the trial of Mendicant Bias for its betrayal of the Ecumene. The Didact decided to keep Bias alive, as it had intimate knowledge of the Flood and could be called upon in case of their return. He had Bias entombed in Installation 00, with one thought aloud to the AI: atonement. Before the sentencing, the Didact paid a visit to Ryzer's village on the Ark to invite him to join the ceremony. Ryzer rebuked him about his decision to fire the Halos, but the Didact maintained that it had been the only option possible. This is where Ryzer suggested that the Didact and the other Forerunners join in their ceremony about the transition of the galaxy. During his final words to Ryzer on Earth, the Didact stated that the Forerunners would cease their participation in affairs of the galaxy and exile themselves, although they both hoped that their descendants would meet each other someday. Ryzer responded by hoping their descendants would reunite and act like brothers, making trouble and finding strength together. Deeply moved, Bornsteller could only utter the word hope before returning to the Lifeworker ship and taking off. After leaving Tyrene, Bornsteller and the surviving Forerunners who had discarded their titles turned to the task of reseeding the rest of the species on their homeworlds. This task took several centuries to accomplish. During this time, Bornsteller engaged in a relationship with Chanter Green based on their mutual mourning over the loss of the Librarian. As the Forerunners completed their task with the San Shayum, Bornsteller recalled a final message that he had received from the Librarian prior to her death. In this message, the Librarian explained that she believed the domain was not truly destroyed and that it could be recovered. She exhorted Bornsteller and Chanter Green to return to Mithrilian, the Forerunner capital, to find the mythological Organon, which was revealed to have been known to the highest levels of leadership in the Ecumene Council, and repair it. Bornsteller appealed to the remaining Forerunners to complete this final task before leaving on their exile, and, despite initial hesitation with the plan, was joined in his expedition to the capital. At the capital, the Forerunners were confronted by a precursor entity known as Abaddon, who sought to judge the Didact and the others for their crimes against the Mantle. However, the Didact and several others managed to evade Abaddon, with Growth Through Child Change eventually sacrificing herself to restore the domain. With their work finished, Bornsteller and the other remaining Forerunners exiled themselves outside of the Milky Way galaxy. Bornsteller reconciled his relationship with Chanter Green, and the two were married, settling on a distant world and giving up their advanced technology in favour of a simple, primitive lifestyle. And the pair eventually had a son together. Over 100,000 years later, a record referred to as the Bornsteller relation, containing an archived testimony of the Didact recorded by catalogue, was discovered by the UNSC on Trevelyan, and served as one of the core documents in Oni's research into the Forerunners. While travelling with the Ace of Spades crew, 343 Guilty Spark told them about his adventures with his friends, including Bornsteller. Spark stated that Bornsteller was long since dead and turned to dust. The Builder was one of the few Forerunners who survived the activation of the Halo Array. Soon embarking on a search for Bastion, he discovered that Bastion had been moved from its original location, a feat he believed would require an impossible act of reconciliation to perform. The Builder was desperate enough that he sought out a surviving Durance and enlisted an Ancilla to help him find a route to the domain, where he hoped he could make it to Bastion. His search took him to Sanghelios at one point, where he believed he had found a route to Bastion. Instead, he arrived at Genesis, where he found that the domain had been severely damaged by the array and was trapped there, degrading over time. Surviving in Genesis systems, the Builder witnessed the beginning of an alliance between Cortana and the Warden Eternal, and reacted with alarm as they took control of Guardians across the galaxy to enforce the Mantle of Responsibility. He noted, however, that the domain had repaired itself enough to cure Cortana of her rampancy, and hoped to finally access it. Eventually, Cortana noticed his presence in her network and began to hunt him down. Though the Builder left audio logs scattered across Genesis to warn the human forces who opposed her, noting that Cortana had not yet taken control of the installation's constructors, and that the installation's monitor Exuberant Witness could use them to take back control. As Cortana began to deploy her amassed Guardian forces across the galaxy, and the Warden Eternal was distracted fighting both Blue Team and Fireteam Osiris, the Builder was able to finally access the domain, restoring him and finally allowing him to locate Bastion. His fate afterwards remains unknown. Thanks for watching. Stick your comments down below, I look forward to what you have to say. I want to give a quick shout out to my patrons, SRTENSHI, the Silent Cartographer, Brian, Sebastian, Holden, Define, Alpha117, Nathan, Red Sea, and Darian, the holders of the mantle, Ty, Black Biscuit, J Rabbit, Austin, Kaiser and Silux, my reclaimers, Zach, Deep Cover, Verbal Statue, Spesico, Spartan A498, Guppy, Josh, Mickey, Bastion, Molshar and Slithery Tube Dude, my Metarchs, and all the other patrons that have jumped aboard to support the channel. There are so many of you now, and all of this really wouldn't be possible without you, so thank you, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. If you like Halo lore discussed to insane levels of detail, hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon so you're told the second a new video hits the shelves. Be sure to support us on all major social media channels, including Discord, and if you really love the channel, consider heading over to Patreon and supporting the channel over there. It would mean the world to me, and would free up more of my time for me to put into this content and other Halo related goodness. Take it easy everyone, and find peace in the domain.